For 50 years, the Phoenix-class vessel known as Spirit of Fire served well as a colony ship. In 2520, it was recommissioned by the UNSC to be used as a warship against the mounting insurrection. But 5 years later, humanity would discover something much worse than rebellion. An alien alliance known as the Covenant had arrived at the planet Harvest. After a series of short and brutal space engagements, it became clear that the Covenant would never relent. In March of 2526, Vice Admiral Preston Cole led a UNSC fleet to retake Harvest, initially managing to quell the Covenant's assault. But this battle was far from over. For 5 years, the UNSC would fight tooth and nail for Harvest. And, with seemingly renewed interest, the Covenant would fight back, glassing most of the planet's surface while amassing a significant force near its northern pole. Under Cole's command, Captain James Cutter sent the Spirit of Fire's groundside forces against the Covenant's stronghold. They were looking for something buried beneath the planet's surface, an ancient machine from a forgotten race of beings known as the Forerunners. Leading the Covenant's campaign was a ruthless arbiter by the name of Ripa Morami, a commander who took direct orders from the Prophet of Regret. Ripa, like a select number of elites before him, had become the Arbiter in order to reclaim his lost glory, after having failed to overthrow his own clan leader. Upon discovering that the relic was an interstellar map leading to another world, Regret ordered the Arbiter to destroy the structure and return to High Charity. As the Covenant departed, the Spirit of Fire's local forces, led by Sergeant John Forge, managed to reclaim the Forerunner relic, also discovering the map. And after briefly analyzing it, Professor Ellen Anders, the ship's resident scientist, determined that the map pointed to the colony of Arcadia.
Population a little under 3 million, largely unexplored, but apparently quite the vacation resort.
It was then that Captain Cutter led the Spirit of Fire to the new planet, hoping to uncover what the Covenant were after.
We can't see through it. The Covenant are up to something.
Following an ancient map buried below the surface of Harvest, the Spirit of Fire arrived at the colony world of Arcadia on February 9th, 2531, only to find the Covenant forces already laying waste to the planet.
We're being overrun. Alien forces are inside the city limits and approaching the spaceport. We're still evacuating civilians. We need help.
Before the Spirit's arrival, 4 UNSC ships, the Belfast, Pillar of Autumn, Texas, and Armstrong, had already engaged a pair of Covenant cruisers. These Covenant ships were led by the Arbiter, a relentless and brutal commander who took orders directly from the Prophet of Regret. The UNSC vessels managed to destroy one of the cruisers, but only after losing the Texas and the Belfast, with both the Autumn and the Armstrong suffering from significant damage. Upon receiving a distress call from Arcadia's surface, Captain Cutter and the ship's AI, Serena, deployed groundside forces to aid the civilian evacuation. Arcadia and its capital city of Perth, once considered a luxurious tourist destination, were now being reduced to ash. It was there that Sergeant Forge fought alongside Spartans and Marines, forcing the Covenant out of the capital city and into the planet's unexplored regions. This success, however, was only momentary, as the Covenant focused entirely on a remote area, constructing a massive energy shield to hide their activity. Confused by their actions, Anders and Forge traveled to the planet's surface using a collection of plasma-based rhinos to punch a hole through the Covenant's shield. There, they found ruins from another age, once again unearthed by the Covenant. Using buried Forerunner technology, the aliens were constructing a modified scarab, larger than any they had ever built before. Prior to its completion, the UNSC forces managed to destroy it, eventually scavenging through the wreckage for clues to the Covenant's occupation. Little did they know, the Arbiter had already found what he came for. The ruins on Arcadia pointed him to yet another world, but this one would hold a secret that could change the course of the war. Breaking through the Covenant's defenses on the planet Arcadia, the UNSC forces, directed by Spirit of Fire Sergeant Forge and Professor Anders, learned that their enemy had stumbled upon yet another Forerunner artifact. On the planet's surface were ruins of an ancient civilization known as the Forerunners. Though Anders and Forge did not know at the time, there was also a map which led to a massive shield world, a long since abandoned superstructure hidden in the remote regions of space. This artificial construct held the key to a dormant Forerunner fleet, technology which would provide the Covenant with unstoppable power.
Let the deconstruction of our gifts begin. The majesty of our new fleet will be unparalleled.
But since the Covenant could not physically activate this installation, they were forced toward an alternate solution. Recognizing that the humans Professor Anders had some level of understanding about the artifact on Harvest, Regret sent the Arbiter back to Arcadia for her.
Capture that human and bring her here.
It will be done.
And with little opposition, he abducted Anders, speeding back to the Shield World and returning his quarry to the Prophet of Regret. This posed yet another challenge for the crew of the Spirit of Fire, as the loss of Anders was a significant security breach.
The Professor's signal has gone to light speed, headed for the border.
That puts it outside weapon range.
Under pressure from Forge and the Spartans, Captain Cutter ordered the Spirit of Fire to follow the escaping Covenant vessel into slipspace. On February 23, 2531, they arrived in uncharted space, high above an alien world. And below, Anders' signal lied somewhere on its surface. Cutter immediately ordered Forge and the Spartans planetside to find the Professor, but when they touched down, they found something else. Thriving on this strange world was a parasitic creature known as the Flood. After waging a series of ground engagements against this new enemy, Anders' signal was once again lost, forcing Forge and the Spartans back aboard the Spirit. When Anders' signal would return shortly later, the crew of the Spirit would learn the truth about this world and the devastating potential it possessed.
Captain, we've got company.
After the Covenant fled from the planet of Arcadia, the UNSC Spirit of Fire pursued them to the outermost reaches of space, fully recognizing that the capture of Professor Anders was a security breach that could change the course of the war. Following her signal to a barren planet deep within Covenant territory, Serena, the ship's AI, conducted a thorough scan of the world's surface. In the process, she accidentally triggered a mysterious machine, opening an immense aperture on its surface and forcing the Spirit of Fire below. At the center of this world lay the Apex site, an elevated platform where the Covenant commander known as the Arbiter had brought the human Professor. It was here that the Prophet of Regret ordered that Anders be used to activate the dormant Forerunner vessels that hung around them, a fleet of unimaginable power. Before he was able to activate the fleet, a new threat was revealed as the Spirit of Fire worked its way through dark caverns within the planet's shell and toward their position. Rising from this bizarre construct, the UNSC ship found itself on the interior of a Dyson sphere, something the Forerunners called the Shield World, a superstructure with a vast interior surface and a burning sun at its core. The Arbiter wasted no time addressing the human presence, sending a Covenant destroyer to meet it as it sped toward them. A brief engagement ensued in which both ships were badly damaged, escaping to the opposite ends of the shell's interior. The Arbiter quickly forced Anders to trigger the Apex site's main console, an act which would activate the Forerunner fleet.
The ancients have granted us the power to doom your race. Let the deconstruction of our gifts begin. The majesty of our new fleet will be unparalleled.
While the Covenant were momentarily distracted, Anders used a nearby platform to escape to the Shield World's surface. There she would find herself in peril once more, as the savage Flood parasite spread across the structure's interior. Drawn to the unexplored recesses of the galaxy in pursuit of the Covenant, the crew of the Spirit of Fire discovered a Forerunner Shield World. This mysterious Dyson sphere held a long-since dormant secret. Within its interior hung a fleet of Forerunner ships, a power so immense that their exploitation at the hands of the Covenant would most certainly spell the end of humanity. The Spirit of Fire's resident scientist, Professor Anders, had been captured by the Covenant, forced to activate the fleet on an elevated platform known as the Apex site. Narrowly escaping, she quickly found herself on the interior surface of this artificial world, a surface which now surged with the parasite known as the Flood. Fortunately for Anders, Sergeant Forge and the Spirit's crew had tracked her to this location, stopping the Flood and quickly bringing her to safety.
You want to be rescued or not?
There, Captain Cutter and the Professor discussed the bitter reality of the Covenant's newly acquired Forerunner fleet. With no debate, they agreed that the only way to stop the Covenant would be to destroy the entire shield world and everything within it. Disengaging their slip-space drive, the Spirit's crew lowered it to the world's interior surface near the base of the Apex site. They knew that in order to destroy the fleet, they would have to destroy the shield world as well, an act which could only be achieved by overloading their FTL drive near the installation's star. Pushing through the last vestiges of the Covenant infantry, Forge and the Spartan Red team led a charge to the Apex site. Although the Covenant had been momentarily forced from their position, they were not without a fight. Quickly recovering, the Arbiter and the large contingent of elites assaulted the Apex site, engaging Forge and the Spartans. After a brief but bloody battle, the Spartans emerged victorious. And despite Forge only narrowly defeating the Arbiter, he realized that the slip-space drive had been damaged in the process. It would now require a manual overload. Someone would have to stay behind.
Sir, it's already overheating. I'll have to separate the core and align them manually when they need to blow.
Son, I have a feeling before this is over, we'll need every last Spartan in the fight. I can do this. Report back to the ship.
Without hesitation, Forge chose himself for the task, ordering the Spartans back to the Spirit of Fire. As the drive overloaded, the Spirit of Fire sped toward the shield world's sun, using the star's expanding gravity well to slingshot their vessel out of the shield world as the entire superstructure collapsed around them. A short time later, Captain Cutter would order the Spirit of Fire survivors into cryosleep. Without an FTL, the ship would take years to return home. While the UNSC long held the crew of the Spirit of Fire as missing, they suddenly changed this designation to lost with all hands on February 10th, 2534. The reason for this change was never publicly disclosed, but remained aggressively contested among suspicious family members of the crew. The true fate of the Spirit of Fire, its captain and its crew, remains a mystery, even to this day.